Yeah, move out of my way. I got the stage now. Hi, everybody. How are you?
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, you can respond. It's not rhetorical. Happy to be here. Chase, thanks for putting this together, and as always, just being a connector of people and bringing people together over important things like this is really cool to be a part of. Happy Sunday. I'm glad that you guys made time to come on a Sunday. Yeah, some woos in the back. It's always nice to I like weekends because you get to kind of shut your brain off of work and then dive into some other stuff. But that said, I'm going to talk about work. So let's talk about work today. If you don't know me, my name is Dustin, like you said, and I want to give you just a quick backstory on my upbringing. But first, I want to survey the room so I kind of know who I'm talking to. Could you, just a quick show of hands, if you do run your own business and it's been at least a year? Somewhere around there. Okay, great, thank you. If you have been running a business less than a year or you're actively trying to start one. Perfect. And then you're not running a business, you have no interest in doing that, and you just want to make an impact on the world somehow. Perfect. It's a good even split. I like this. Okay, so it gives me absolutely no direction of who to target here. I'll go with that. But I grew up in Texas. Anyone from Texas here? Yes. Where at? Where at in Texas? Austin. Boom. H-Town. Love it. Same. Cool. I used to go to Houston a lot. You from Texas also?
I'm not from Texas, but I live in El Paso. If I'll throw that out.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sweet. Yeah. Yep. Gosh, I remember so many times making like drives through Texas because I was in San Antonio area and then Austin area for a while, and I would drive through like to get to Arizona or California, and like just to El Paso is like a solid 8 hours from the middle of the state. The state is so giant. I love Texas, and I grew up there, and sometimes I feel guilty because I had such a good childhood. Like I wish I had a cooler story, but I'm fortunate. I feel glad that my parents stayed together. They had a good relationship. They were great parents. I had two brothers, and we got along well. Really good growing up. A lot of advantages. We lived in a trailer park, which was awesome. And I know that doesn't sound like an advantage, but you get to meet some really interesting people growing up in a trailer park, because it's not your typical people. You get people from all different stages of life and different cast of characters. But it's actually where I grew a love for entrepreneurship and where that all started for me, and particularly with my neighbor Alex. And this is a true story, and I'm just going to preface that because it sounds made up, but it's not. My neighbor Alex, I thought he was so cool. He was cool. And I remember being out in my backyard one day, which was also his front yard, because that's how trailers work. You share yards. And then he kind of came out of his storage shed on his Stars and Stripe Huffy bike, and he was doing like a wheelie, and then he was doing all these other tricks. And I remember just being blown away. I think I was 7, and I was watching him, and he saw me, and he rolled over there. He's basically an adult. He's like 13, and so I'm just looking up, and I'm like, wow, man, how did you do all that, and how do I do it? And he looked at me and stared me in the eyes, took the cigarette out of his mouth. He said, son, practice makes perfect. And that's literally when I learned the meaning of hard work and to persist through stuff. And then, then started the mowing of lawns of people in the area, and picking up rocks for the owner of the trailer park, which he paid me $3 for an entire day of picking up rocks. That's child abuse. That's why I moved. He was a rude landlord. But it was a good childhood, and it really taught me a lot. About 3.5 years ago, I started a company called Jump Influence, as Chase was saying. We do marketing for e-commerce. And I feel fortunate to be doing work that I find value in personally, and work that I have meaning in and that I also enjoy doing. And because I know the reality is, every morning, millions of Americans and people all over the world, you roll out of bed sluggishly, you make your coffee with your eyes half closed, commute to an office you don't want to go to, work with people you don't really care to be working with, doing a job you don't care to do, but you have to make money. And I just want to first say that that's so valid. Like, sometimes you don't have another option, and sometimes, and I'm talking kind of generally here, because there are a lot of people who love their jobs, and that's kind of the goal, right? Whether you start something or you don't, yoking up with other people to do something you care about. But for me, it was painful for me, because what my heart wanted was to start something of my own. I just didn't really know why yet, and kind of that why held me back for quite a long time. So there's there's a story I want to tell because I think it illustrates quite nicely how much I didn't like my first job out of college, because I was really dead set on starting a company, but I just couldn't figure it out yet. And I was working in marketing, and I used to play this game, and anybody can play this game, so if you want to take notes, feel free to. If you don't like your job, it's really good. What you do is you drink as much liquid as you possibly can throughout the day, and then you count how many times you have to pee. And then you waste a lot of time, and it's great. I think my record was 45 minutes wasted in a day just from bathroom trips. And you can extend it if you stop at vending machines or try to talk to people along the way. So it's really useful, and you can still get paid. And so I used to do stuff like that because I just wasn't connecting. And thinking back now, honestly, I think a lot of it wasn't that the job was bad. It wasn't that the people were bad. I just had an attitude issue. I wasn't seeing any value in what I was doing. And I felt like I was just there because I had to be, which is never a good motivation. So getting more into, Chase was talking about, I've been working very, very closely on more high performance topics lately. So talking about productivity, how do we optimize our bodies so we actually have more energy for the day? How do we get more things done that matter? And the root of it all is that you find meaning in your work. You have to find a deep-rooted meaning in the work you're doing, even if it's not the actual work itself, even if you have meaning that is outside of the work, but the work enables you to have meaning elsewhere. And so that's what I want to talk a little bit about today, is kind of go down that path. Here's a question I want to ask you. This sounds so morbid, but here's a reality. You could die unexpectedly today. So are you doing work that matters to you? And if you're not, it is urgent that you figure it out. And so let's go through some ways to do that. A couple of statistics I wrote down. One, there's this study I was reading up on from, I think it was from 2017, and they surveyed like 12,000 people from all different industries in America, and they asked them a bunch of questions, and one of the statistics was that 50% of people said they find meaning in their work, which I thought was pretty good. Like 50% sounds awesome. I thought it'd be like 10. So that was great. But then what was interesting about, like, sometimes we look at meaning, right? So why is meaning even important? If someone just has kind of a mental feeling of I have meaning, so what? Like, does that actually matter? So they dug into those people, so they took that 50%, and they found that compared to the 50% of people who didn't find meaning in their work, the people who did were 1.7 times more likely to actually be satisfied with their job. And even that, why would that matter, other than their own personal happiness? But of those group, they were 1.4 times more likely to be engaged in their work. So when we're engaged in our work, we can do things that have impact. Not to go on too many of a statistic rant, but these all just connect really nicely. There's another one, there's a different study, but they found 71% of people were actively looking for another job when they surveyed them. So there's this disconnect between people doing work and actually getting something out of it and feel like they're contributing, feeling like they have purpose of some kind other than just going somewhere because they have to and they have to make money. And again, that itself can be a meaning if you put, if you kind of assign that, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So there's 4 things I want to go over of ways you can actually feel meaning from your work or find that if you haven't found it yet. Just quick show of hands. This is a close your eyes kind of raise your hand. Who here feels like they have meaning with their work? Like usually, it doesn't have to be all the time, but like usually you feel some sense of meaning. Okay, cool, thank you. How many of you feel generally like it's because you might need to switch jobs? If you don't feel meaning, maybe you need to switch jobs. Maybe that feels like an answer. Okay, great, thank you. So one of the things that I found when I finally did, because it was probably a 5 or 6 year period where I was trying to start a business, but again, I didn't really know why. I just wanted that, which is fine. But it wasn't until I was working the last job, the one that I left to start the business I run now, and there was just this moment of something real that happened with me, and it's not something I wanted to happen, and I wish it didn't, but it really had good fruit for my life. But my dad had cancer when he was I think it was about 5 years before this point I'm talking about, and his cancer relapsed. And so he had to start doing radiation again. And so that was one of those flashbacks for me of like, you think cancer's done, and then you have to go through it all over again. I just felt so bad for my dad, and my whole, my family was scared. And then literally right after that, my mom got diagnosed with liver disease. And liver disease, if you're not familiar, is pretty dangerous because a lot of it is how your body's responding to things. And if your liver is not filtering properly, a lot of stuff can go wrong. It can be like one day you're fine, the next day you're dead. It can be that you can eat the wrong stuff or too much of the wrong stuff or drink too much of something and die. And it can be that instant. So for me, when these things were happening, I remember thinking, like, I need to go see my parents. I need to, like, they live in Texas, I'm in LA. Like, I need to make more of an effort to see them because they're still young, and it was one of those moments of, like, I thought I had more time, but I need to make sure that I'm seeing them. And I didn't have any time off to take at work. My boss wouldn't let me go. And that was really my moment of, okay, I need to make my own business work because I need the flexibility. And that's something I just need to do. So that's an example of, for me, how I assigned meaning to the job I was already doing in order to be able to work harder and actually achieve that. And the piece I think a lot of people miss, too, is sometimes you're in a job where, like even for me, during that time, I assigned meaning to my side business work, but I also was able to assign meaning to the job I was at. Even though I didn't particularly like it, I found new passion for it because I knew that income is what was funding my dream job. Without that income, I couldn't start a business. I wouldn't have any money. I would have to, and boy, I'll tell you, or my wife will tell you, I quit my job so many times before this period. In like a 5-year period, I probably had 10 different jobs because I always thought the next thing would save me. I always thought the next thing would help me find meaning or find purpose. And I was always putting so much blame on the company I was working for or the people around me instead of taking ownership of that and saying, how can I assign meaning to this job that I'm doing? And sometimes that meaning is, I'm going to feed my family. And that's super important to me, and I need to keep this job, and I need to do well with it. And sometimes it's, I'm going to fund my dream on the side, but I need that job. So assigning meaning is super, super powerful for being able to persist through difficulty and actually make impact with where you're at. The second thing is just being a giver. I think we've all felt this. Has anyone volunteered somewhere before? Anywhere? Yeah, everyone. Everyone's volunteered somewhere. And why do we volunteer places? This is rhetorical. I'll answer it for you. Dramatic pause. We do it because it feels good and we know that it's important. So similarly, it's because we're giving of ourselves, but then how do you feel after? It doesn't even matter if you don't have to be building houses in Uganda. You can be, it's cool if you are, but you could also help a public school with their library and organize the books. Like after earthquakes, I know that was a big thing, like just going over to a school and helping them organize their books. It doesn't matter what we're doing, we feel this sense of like this was something that mattered. And it causes us to feel good. So we all know this one. Let's see. I'm gonna quiz you guys. If you give, you shall. Very good. If you give, you shall receive. It's a universal law. We all know it's true. We felt it. So if we lean more into being a giver than we do being a taker, it helps us to frame our minds around what we're doing and find more meaning out of it. So giving more than we're taking. And then another one that's super important is just using your uniqueness. Because sometimes even if we're doing the job we know is important, and we found importance to it, we know it's important for other people, we know it matters, if you feel like you're just bad at it, it's really hard to stay engaged. So sometimes you need to just get your skills better, you got to lean in more at work. But also sometimes it means you need to change your role, or you need to change or go start something of your own using your unique skills. So leaning into what makes you unique and what you are great at will bear a lot of fruit in the meaning that you feel at work and making your work feel like it matters because you can do a better job. And when you look around the world around you and you find like you're in your zone, you're in your sweet spot, it helps you to be able to put more effort in. And again, the greater goal here is impact. Impact through work that matters to you. And then the last one I want to cover is maybe a little controversial, but I think you'll agree with me by the end of it. We'll see how my persuasion skills are today. But it is stop chasing happiness. Stop chasing happiness if you want to make an impact. Now, I'm going to back up. I don't mean don't be happy, and I don't mean find happiness, and I don't mean do something you hate. What I mean is stop chasing the feeling of happy all the time with your work. That is exactly what I was doing and what I know a lot of people do when I was jumping from job to job. I've started 10 businesses in the last 8 years, and do you know how many stuck? One stuck, and it's the only one that I persisted through the moments where I wasn't always happy. Because it was a sense of purpose for me. I found meaning in it. I was able to persist through things that aren't always fun, aren't always giving me hits of happiness. So it's super important to lean into meaning more than you lean into happiness, and you'll find happiness. Have you ever thought about why? I think about this a lot. Like, why do we care so much about not happiness, because happiness is important, but why do we feel like we're constantly chasing it? Every decision we make is, will this make me happy right now? Like, sometimes we don't even have a sense of delayed gratification because we're so invested in just wanting to be happy every single second. For me, what I'm finding is, one is that we're fed it a lot. We're fed the notion that we should always be happy, and even with our work, we should always be happy every second. And if we're not, that something's wrong, and that's just not true. We all have moments that we're not super pumped about. We all have paperwork we don't like doing. There's always, admin stuff or emails we don't feel like sending. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it or we should change jobs. It means we need to persist through that stuff. And the only way to do that is when you have some meaning behind it. But we're fed it through advertising. And again, I work in marketing, so I know this very well. What does Coca-Cola sell us? Coke. Yeah, it sells, I see people smiling. They sell happiness. Happiness is literally their campaign. You drink Coke, you'll be happy. And so many companies do that. We're getting hit with it all the time. And how many different online courses or masterminds do we see on a daily basis of basically the selling point? And they can be great courses, but the selling point is usually, look how happy I am. If you want to be this happy, you need to buy this thing from me. So we're being sold this a lot. So we need to remember the perspective that happiness is important, but fulfillment is what we need to be going after. The other reason is because of what's chemically happening in our brains. We get a hit of dopamine. I think most of you in this world probably know that. A lot of people in the fitness world here. Dopamine is what they call the happy drug. It's what's released when it's connected to our reward system. So when something good happens that we like, we get a hit of happiness. And then what do we want to do next, though? We want to find that again. This is why it's the same thing with drug addicts. It's the exact same thing. Dopamine is what's released when you do drugs. And so if you wonder why people are like frantically trying to find drugs once they get addicted to it, it's because they're not addicted to the drug, they're addicted to being happy. And that's the thing that makes them happy. So that they're trying to find that, but they're ignoring the rest of the things that are important because they're so fixated on it. And I think we do that a lot with our lives and with our work instead of leaning into the things that are important. I want us to think about happiness like this. Think about happiness as a bucket of water. You need that water for drinking, you need that water to feed your plants, whatever you need it for. You have your bucket of water, you use it, and then you don't have water anymore. So what we do is we go find water to refill our buckets up. So we're on this never-ending quest of finding the next puddle, the next lake, to fill up our bucket so we can use it. But what if instead of trying to fill a bucket all the time, we started digging wells? What if we dug wells of fulfillment that we could draw from anytime we need a little extra boost in the day? So instead of having to wander around finding happiness in little hits, we can have something deeper to pull from and not have to wander so much. That's my challenge to you guys, is to think about the work you're doing and if you're chasing buckets or if you're digging wells. And if you truly want to make an impact on the world through your work, don't chase happiness, because even when you find it, it's fleeting, it's an emotion. Instead, seek fulfillment, and happiness will find you. And when it leaves you, you'll know it's going to come back because you have something deeper to draw from than just buckets of water.